Welcome to the John Gets Games tutorial for The Last Kingdom. In this video, I'll be teaching you the rules to the game as it's being played, and I will be showing half of a 3-player game today. Now before I go into that, I would like to ask that if you enjoy this video, that you please then click the like button for it down below, as well as the subscribe button for the channel. In addition to that, if you'd like to directly support the channel and gain access to a wide variety of exclusive perks, then please go to patreon.com/johngetsgames. Some of those perks include my opinions episodes, where I go in depth about the things I like and don't like about all the games that I'm playing recently. You can also watch some videos early and advertisement free, and you'll also gain access to an exclusive podcast feed where you can hear audio versions of all of the vlogs that I make, including those opinions episodes. Now, the final thing I'd like to ask is if while you're watching this video, you see some part of the game that really jumps out to you as interesting, then please comment about that down below, because I'd love to see that kind of feedback. All right, let's now jump into the game. Out here, we have the game fully set up and ready to play for our 3 different players. Now, before I start, I would like to ask that you please turn on the Klingon subtitles. I might make mistakes as I'm showing you the game, and those will let me put corrections on the screen where you should be able to see them, and I will also put them below this video in the top comment. I also want to point out that today I'm filming with a prototype version of the game, so the art and components that you see here might not match those in the final version. Well, let's start things off with a brief overview of the game. Now, it is set in Britain between the years 1872 and 1898 AD, and in this current situation, the kingdoms of Britain are at war. Many have already fallen from the invading Danes, but in addition to them, there are multiple different factions with aligned goals that are the Saxons. Now, as we play through the game, there will be conflicts in each of these regions, as collectively the Saxons fight with the Danes. Now, as players, we are commanders, and we are always allied with either the Danes or the Saxons. But as the game goes on, that allegiance can shift over to the other side through various actions and effects. Speaking of actions, in this game we're going to play through 2 rounds, and at the start of each round we are going to be drafting cards from these decks. Each player will get 5 cards, we will each pick 1 simultaneously, then pass the rest. We'll then continue to take them until we have 4 cards in our hand, and we'll add those to our cards that are associated with our leader. Now, as we go through the round, we can play these cards as actions in order to influence these various regions out here. We can also move our leaders and our heroes that we can recruit to various areas, and that will influence the relative strength of the Danes as well as the Saxons in those spots. Now, once everybody passes consecutively, we will have conflict in a specific region, and then depending on whether the Saxons or the Danes won, the players allied with those different factions will either gain victory points or action points. So even if you lose and don't get victory points, you'll gain action points that you can use later on in the game. Now, if you are allied with the winner, you do gain points, and those will depend on your affinity levels with the various factions in the game and the armies and heroes that also happen to be in the area that just had conflict. So it's certainly possible that one player could get a lot more points than another, even though they might both be allied with the winning side. Now, the round is going to continue until we've completed conflict in every single one of the regions. At that point, we will move into the second round, where we draft once again, this time from a different deck of cards. We will then have conflict in all of the regions again, and only at that point will the game be over, and the player with the most victory points will be the winner. Now, I haven't talked about much of the game, including these market actions up here, and don't worry, I'll explain how all of this works while we are actually playing. On that note, I think it's now time for us to start the game, and for today's tutorial, we are going to play as Uhtred down here. As you can see, each of the players has a leader. We have this player card in front of us that tells us details about the leader. For example, we start allied with the Danes, and our starting location is going to be Northumbria, which is why our leader figure is right over here. You can also see that we have this allegiance ring underneath our leader, so we can easily see we are currently allied with the Danes. If we change our allegiance, we can simply flip that over, and now we can easily see that we're allied with the Saxons. Now, as I said during the overview, this game is going to take place over 2 rounds, and within each round, we're going to have 3 phases. The first phase is drafting, where we are going to gain new cards from the round-specific deck. The second phase is conflict, where we are going to play actions and have conflicts evaluated out here on the map. And then the third phase is cleanup in the first round, where we get ready for the second round, or final scoring once we have finished the second round of the game. So we can start the first round with the first phase, which is the drafting phase, and for that, we're going to take all of the cards associated with round 1, and we will now deal 5 of these cards for each of the players. Now what happens is we will all simultaneously look at these 5 cards that we just got, and we are going to select one of them. We're going to put that face down on top of our hand of leader cards. It's worth noting everyone got 2 cards associated with their leader, and they always start each round with those in their hand. After we do that, we're going to pass the remaining cards to the left in the draft phase in the first round, and if it's the second round of the game, we actually pass them to the right, and then we select one card from those that are passed to us. So that means the cards that we don't choose will be passed to the Siegfried and Eric player. So that means we have to select one of these 5 cards. Now, I haven't explained most of the game yet, so I'm not going to go into the details of what the options are over here, but I do want to point out that we have 2 different types of cards in our hand. Specifically, when we look at the top, this one says it's a secondary action instant. In fact, we have 3 of these as options, and then the others are primary actions. When we move on to the conflict phase, on our turns, we have to perform one primary action, but we can do as many secondary actions as we want. However, these secondary actions are special. They actually activate the moment they enter your hand. Now, during this drafting phase, the instance will actually be performed once we've finished all of the draft, and I think we want to take Brutal Tactics. I'll explain the details of this card later on, but I think this one could be great for us. So we're going to add this into our hand, and we then pass our cards to the left player, and of course now we have to wait for our opponents to pick their cards. All right, we've all passed, so these are the cards that Aelswith passed to us, and let's now take a look at them. Once again, we have primary actions as well as secondary actions instants, but we have a new type, which is secondary action passive. Now again, these instants will activate as soon as we finish the draft phase, or if we get them during the conflict phase, we resolve them immediately, whereas secondary action passive cards stay in our hand, and we can play them on one of our turns during the conflict phase before a primary action or before passing. Now, this one actually lets us draw a round 2 card during round 1, and that sounds like fun. I think this is going to be the card that we pick. So we can add that into our hand. Then, of course, our opponents need to make their drafting decisions. All right, we've passed, so we can once again all select one card from those that were passed to us. So these are the 3 cards, and all of them are primary actions. There is a new type of card in here, though, and that is this one. That is a hero card, and if we play this one, we will actually gain Ragnar the Younger's hero figure, and we can then put them out here on the board. And that actually seems pretty great. So I think this is the card that we're going to take. And now we've all made our decisions, so we once again have these 2 to look at. And as I mentioned before, we're only going to draft 4 cards. That means we're going to select one of these 2, and the other one is going to be placed into a discard pile for the specific deck they're associated with. If while we're playing the game, we ever need to draw cards from a deck and there aren't enough, we'll shuffle up that discard pile and make a new deck. So we have to pick one of these, and they're actually somewhat similar. They give us an extra action point we can use, and they both increase affinity, although I think I like Empathy for All a little bit better. Once again, I'll explain the details of all of this later on during the conflict phase. So we're going to add Empathy for All into our hand. The other card will be put into a discard pile, and that pile is face down. All right, we've now finished the draft, and each one of us has 4 cards that we've added into our hand, so we have 6 cards total, including our starting cards. Now, at this point, we all have to simultaneously reveal any secondary action instant cards that are in our hand. And we actually have 2 of those. So we're going to activate both of these. We'll reveal them first. This Empathy for All says we are going to gain 1 action token, and then we are going to increase our affinity in the faction that we have the least affinity in, and if there's a tie, we can choose between those. Now, when we gain action tokens, we simply take them from the supply and put them in front of us. We started with 5 as shown here on our board, so that is a 6th action point that we can use later on. And then over here, we have the affinity tracks. With that in mind, let's focus in a little bit. Now, at the beginning of the game, we set our affinities according to our player boards. As you can see, we start with 2 Danish affinity, 1 West Saxon, and 1 Mercian affinity. And our affinity levels dictate the amount of points that we get for the armies of those types in conflicts where those armies are victorious. Now, once again, Empathy for All is going to increase our affinity in a faction that we have the least of, and it looks like we have 0 for Northumbrians and at least 1 for the others. So that's going to be this one, so we increase it up 1 spot, and interestingly enough, all players currently have 1 affinity with the Northumbrian faction. I do want to point out that if your token is ever at the top and you gain more, you simply get 6 victory points immediately and leave your token on that spot. After performing this instant card, we put it face up in front of us and it's going to stay there for the rest of the round. This one doesn't happen to do anything for us, but the other one does. As you can see, this also gets us an action token, so we are up to 7, which is certainly a good thing to have, and this has a permanent effect. That says whenever one or more armies of your opposing allegiance are removed for any reason, we gain 1 victory point. Now, our allegiance starts the game as Danish, and we can see our allegiance with this token. If it's flipped over, then that would be us allied with the Saxons. Now what that means is for the rest of the game we have this effect, so we will gain victory points for removing armies of our opposing allegiance, which is certainly something we want to do anyway. We are going to remove any of these face-up cards that are not permanents or heroes when we finish the round, but for now we keep all cards played during the round face up in front of us. I can cover Empathy for All though because it doesn't have any ongoing effects for us. Now we're all going to perform these instants simultaneously at the end of the draft, and it looks like Siegfried and Eric has Effective Tactics. This is going to gain them 1 action point, and that's going to go behind their screen. Technically, we also should have a screen so that our opponents cannot see how many action tokens we have, but I'm not showing that for the purposes of easily seeing what we have for this video. Now this also has a permanent effect that they will have for the entire game. That says once per turn before performing a market action, they may move the cheapest plaque to the most expensive slot and shift all of the plaques down to replace it. The market plaques are right up here, and their cost in action points is printed along the bottom. I'll explain how these work in more detail later on, but as you can see, Siegfried and Eric now can, for free, move the cheapest one up here, sliding them down, changing the cost of the one that they probably actually want to perform in that moment. I suppose for table space reasons, we could also tuck these so we can slide them along with our other permanent effects. As you can see, each one of the player mats also has a permanent effect, and I'll explain these as we continue through the tutorial. Of course, at the same time, Aelswith is also performing all of their instants, although it looks like they didn't take any. All of the cards in their hand are either secondary passive cards or primary action cards. Alright, we finished the draft phase, so now we can move into the conflict phase. Now the very first thing that happens in conflict is the player who has the conflict token has to place this down into a region that is currently not peaceful. Now there are 5 different regions out here on the board, and as conflicts are resolved, peace tokens will be placed down. Obviously, at the start of the conflict phase, there are no peace tokens, and we actually have the conflict token. The reason for that is because we have the lowest initiative printed on our mat. We have a 1, Siegfried and Eric have a 9, and Aelswith has a 10, so ours is the lowest, and we get to place this out at the start of the conflict phase. It is worth noting that when we start the conflict phase during round 2, we will not use initiative for figuring out who gets to place this down, and I'll explain that once we get there. So we now have a decision to make. We can put this down into any one of these 5 regions on the board. I think let's just go for Northumbria. That is where our leader starts the game, so we're going to put this token here, and that means the conflict is currently happening in Northumbria. Now as soon as this token is placed down, we need to modify the strength track down at the bottom of the board. As you can see, there are 2 tokens for this track, one for the Danish allegiance and one for the Saxon allegiance, and we now have to put these down onto the track to match the strength of the associated armies in the conflict region. With that in mind, let's focus in. Now, each one of these cubes is an army, and during setup, we put them down according to this up here. So there are 2 Danish and 2 Northumbrian armies, and then we also put a random army down from a subset of army tokens, and in this case, that ended up being Mercian. Now, every army adds 1 strength, and every leader or hero figure that's in a region also has a base strength of 1. However, that can be changed by permanent effects. Now, we are Uhtred, and that is our leader figure in the region, and we have a permanent effect saying Uhtred's strength is 2 during round 1 and 3 during round 2. With this in mind, when we come back up here, we can see that we have a strength of 2 towards the Danish allegiance because that's what our allegiance ring shows. And again, that always matches our allegiance token that's face up in front of us. So that is 2 strength for the Danes, plus another 1, 2 from these armies. So there is 4 Danish strength in the area, and then there is 1, 2, 3 Saxon strength. With that in mind, we can now put the strength tokens onto the associated spots on this track, so it's very easy for all players to know exactly what the allegiance strengths are in the current conflict region. Now, strength is important because that dictates which side is going to win in conflict. Currently, if conflict happened in Northumbria, the Danes would win because they are stronger. Now, of course, as we move leaders, armies, and heroes around, as well as add and remove armies, that's going to change the strength. And every time we do something to change strength, we modify it down here. Again, this is always only tracking the region with the conflict token in it. Well, we've now placed the conflict token, but now what happens is the player with the second highest initiative is going to place the succession token down. Now, this token indicates what region will have conflict once the current conflict is resolved. So after this conflict happens, we'll move on to the succession region. and the Siegfried and Eric player gets to choose this. I do want to point out that the rest of us have just a single leader, whereas Siegfried and Eric have 2 leaders, and they're both controlled by the same player. There are quite a few asymmetries between each one of the leader options that you can play, and I'll explain the asymmetries for these 3 as we continue to play. But for Siegfried and Eric, it's pretty obvious their asymmetry has to do with them having 2 leader tokens instead of 1. Now, they have to place the succession token down into a region that does not have the conflict token or a peace token, and they've decided to go for East Anglia. Once again, that means once the current conflict is over, East Anglia is going to be the region for the next conflict of the game, but it's not currently in conflict at this point. Once the succession token is placed, it's now time for us to perform turns during this conflict phase, and the player with the 3rd lowest initiative is going to take that first turn, and in this case, that is going to be Aelswith. Now, during a player's conflict turn, they can perform as many secondary actions as they want before they perform a primary action, and they can perform at most 1 primary action on their turn. They could also decide to pass, and if you pass, you can also perform secondary actions on that same turn. For their turn, Aelswith is not going to perform any secondary actions, but for a primary action, they are going to play a card from their hand. Now, primary actions can come from hand. They can also come from the leader mats themselves with primary leader movement actions. And activating most market plaques up here is also a primary action. Now, once again, for their primary action on this turn, though, they're going to play a card, and that is Change of Focus. Now, we can look over here on the card. It says primary action, and again, you can only perform 1 of these on your turn. And down below, it says they can move the conflict token to a different region that doesn't have a peace token and continue the conflict phase as normal with that new conflict region, or they can remove 1 army from any region. So they have these 2 options, and currently, Aelswith is the only player who's allied with the Saxons, and the Saxons are losing Northumbria, so they're going to play Change of Focus to immediately move this conflict token. So that means it's not going to be happening in Northumbria. Instead, they've decided to move it down here to Wessex. This played card is going to go face up in front of them. And of course, since the conflict token moved, we now need to change the strength track. Now we can see Aelswith's leader is over here, and they provide 1 strength. So that is 1 for the Saxons, then 2, 3, 4. So that means the Saxon strength is at 4, while the Danes' strength is just at 2. So that'll go right over here, and that's finished Aelswith's turn, because again, they have performed a primary action. So their turn is done, which means play goes clockwise over to us, and now we get to make a choice. Now, currently, we have these 4 cards in our hand, and again, we could either pass, or we could do a primary action, and we could do as many secondary actions as we want before we make that choice. Again, we could do a secondary action and then choose to pass, and if we pass, we could still do more things later on the round, again, as long as at least 1 other opponent doesn't pass before it comes back around to us. Now, I mentioned during the draft that I like the idea of this Chaos card, and I think let's use it right now. Again, this is a secondary action passive, and that means we can do this right now before our primary action. You cannot perform any secondaries after the primary action. Now, this says we can draw a round 2 card off the top of the deck and then add it to our hand, and again, this does not end our turn. We still can take a primary action or pass. So we can draw the top card from the round 2 deck. It looks like the card we drew is We Cannot Fail. Now, this is a pretty good card for us in the moment, and I think we're actually going to play this card for our primary action. Now, if we look down below, it says we get to add 2 Dane armies to a region adjacent to a region with at least 1 Dane army in it, and then we can remove 1 army from that region. Currently, our allegiance is towards the Danes, and the conflict is happening in Wessex, where the Danes are losing. So I think we are going to target this region. It's obviously adjacent to a region with at least 1 Dane. So again, we're going to take 2 Danish armies and add them into that region, and then remove 1 army of our choice from this region. Looks like we only really have this as an option, so we'll remove a West Saxon army, and that'll go off to the side of the board. Of course, the moment this happens, the strength in Wessex changed drastically. The Saxons went down by 1, and the Danes went up by 2, and now they are in the lead with this conflict. On top of this, we now get to activate our new permanent that says whenever we remove 1 or more armies of our opposing allegiance, we gain 1 point. And of course, we are allied with the Danes, and a Saxon army was just removed. So we'll gain a point, and this goes behind our screen, so our opponents don't know how many points we currently have. I'm just going to put this over here for now, though. Remember, our opponents technically can't see this. So that card that we played goes face up in front of us, and that was a primary action, so our turn is done. Which means play moves over to Siegfried and Eric. Now, they've decided to pass. They could do a primary action, but currently, they're pretty happy with the way things are, so they want to see what everyone else is going to do. Because they passed, that means play is going to move clockwise. So that means it's time for Aylesworth to go, and they've decided to pass as well. Now, normally nothing else happens when passing, however, they have a special effect. This says each time Aylesworth passes, they gain 1 action token, which seems pretty great, but you'll also notice they only start with 1 action token behind their screens, whereas the other players started with 5. So it's possible Aylesworth could get even more than 5 as the round goes on, but they need to pass in order to do that, and they need to make sure they're passing at the right time to get the best advantage from it. It's possible this isn't a good time for them to pass, but that's what they've decided to do. That means play is going to come back around to us, and if we pass, then conflict is going to happen over here, and I think that's what we want to have happen. If we don't pass, we have to expend resources, and we only have these 3 cards left, and we don't gain any new cards until we begin the next round of the game, or unless we find some specific action to get us more cards. So we have to allocate our cards accordingly, because this is primarily what we'll have to play with for this first half of the game. So yeah, I think we're going to pass. Because all players passed consecutively, that means conflict is going to happen in the region with the conflict token, so conflict will now happen in Wessex. So let's focus down here. Now we're going to put a peace token into this region, and we'll have the Dane side face up, because the Danes have won because they have more strength. If it was the other way around, then we flip it over to show the Saxon side. Now this token is going to go into this region, and that means there will not be any more conflicts in this region for the rest of the round, unless there is some card effect that allows this token to be removed. That's pretty rare, but it is definitely a possibility. Now I do want to mention that if there was a tie for strength in this region, then conflict would technically happen, but there is not peace, so we would not put the token down, and this token would move on, but we'd have to return back to this region in order for the round to end. Now, I suppose it is worth noting that if there is a tie, and this is the last region without a peace token, then there is no winners, but we would still end the conflict phase. The conflict phase normally ends once every region has a peace token, and I'll talk about that in more detail later. Either way, this is obviously not the case. There is no tie. The Danes have won over here. And now every player who has allegiance for the winning side can potentially score points for it. We can do this in any order, and I think we'll just score ours first. And the way this works is we can choose up to 5 armies of the winning allegiance in that region and score them. Now, we are allowed to score these armies out here. We could also score for hero figures in this area that we specifically have control over, but we can never score for leaders. Now, in this case, there are no heroes. It's just going to be armies, and there are 4 Danish armies over here. So we're going to select these 4 and score all of them, and we'll gain points for each equal to our current affinity level with that faction. For us, we are in the 2 points each area. In fact, Siegfried and Eric is also in that area. So we are going to score 4 times 2 or 8 points. And Siegfried and Eric are also going to do that. There are no choices in this moment. This is obviously the best one. As the game goes on, we start to get our own heroes in this area, and as there's a wider variety of tokens, especially with the Saxons winning, you will have more opportunities to select different armies. And it's worth noting again, multiple players can score the same armies. So again, we'll gain 8 points, and so will Siegfried and Eric. These points will go behind our screens. And I do want to point out that there's a possibility of getting an on-your-own victory bonus. Now, that happens when only one player has allegiance with the winning side for that conflict. For example, if it was like this, and we were the only ones allied with the Danes, well, in that case, we were on our own, and we would get 5 bonus victory points. Of course, we weren't alone, though. And now every player whose allegiance is going towards the loser of this conflict is going to gain 2 action points that they can put behind their screen. And then also, if there is only one player allied with the losing side, well, they also get an on-your-own bonus. In this case, that is going to be 2 more action tokens. So while Aylesworth didn't get any points, they did gain 4 action points for being allied with the losing side of this conflict. Now, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game is the winner, so you do want to get points, but it seemed like Aylesworth felt like it was okay passing and letting this one go to the Danes in order to better strengthen their ability to maybe get some more points later on in the round. Now, the next part of conflict involves disbanding armies. We only do this if a peace token was put down. If there was a tie, then we would not disband anything, and it's worth noting, nobody would score for anything either. Now, the way disbanding works is if there are more than 5 armies total in this area, then we will remove armies from the faction that has the most until we are at 5 or under. In this case, there are 4 Danes and 2 West Saxons, so there's more Danes, and obviously there's more than 5, so we remove this. Now we are at 5, so we're good. It is worth noting, if it was a situation like this, where there's a tie for the most, then you would simply remove one from all of the tied for the most. So in this case, we would remove both of these. There is still a tie, and there's still more than 5, so we'd remove these, and then we'd be good. So it's possible after disbanding armies, there will be less than 5. Of course, that's not actually what happened over here. Now, the next thing we have to do with this resolved conflict is move the conflict token to the region with the succession token. That means East Anglia is going to be the next conflict region, which means we have to immediately modify the strength track. There are 3 Danish armies and 2 Saxon armies, so that is the current strength situation, which means the Danes are currently winning in East Anglia. After moving the conflict token, the succession token now needs to be moved into a region that currently doesn't have peace or the conflict token. Now, this is going to be moved by the player who currently has the prepare for invasion token. Technically, somebody should have this. I kind of skipped over it earlier, but now I'd like to explain how this works in more detail. Let's focus out and talk a little bit more about passing. Now remember, when you do a regular pass action during the conflict phase, play will move to the next player, and if everybody passes in a row, then we have conflict like we saw. But if somebody passes and somebody doesn't, by the time it comes back to the passing player, they could actually choose to pass again or do a primary action on that turn. Now that's the way normal passing works. However, every time you do a pass action, if the prepare for invasion token is over here on the board, then you have an alternate passing option. In this option, you can take the prepare for invasion token and then put it in front of yourself. You are passing, so you gain any benefits for passing if you happen to have any of that. But then this means you will not take any more turns until the next conflict is performed. Obviously, signaling to your opponents that you won't take any more turns until conflict is a pretty big concession, but you do get 2 benefits for taking the prepare for invasion token. The first one is you gain action tokens equal to the number of peace tokens that are currently out on the board. So that means if there's one of these out on the board, you'll get 1 action. Of course, earlier on, there were no peace tokens on the board, so if somebody had taken the prepare for invasion token, they would have gained no actions. Now, the other benefit for taking this is the player with this token will be the one who decides where the succession token is going to be placed onto the board. Now, up until this point, nobody actually took the prepare for invasion token, and technically, as soon as we start a conflict, which happens once everybody passes in a row, if this is still over here on the board, then you give it to the last player who passed, but they do not gain any action tokens as a reward. So that means technically at the beginning of this conflict, this should have been given to us because we were the last ones to pass consecutively in order to trigger this conflict. Because we do have this prepare for invasion token, that means we get to decide where the succession token will be placed onto the board. And I think we'll put it back over here in Northumbria. We tried to have conflict over here already, and it got moved, and with this now placed, it's very likely that Northumbria will have the 3rd conflict of the round. After the succession token moves, the prepare for invasion token is put back over here, and of course now when a player takes this as they pass, they will gain 1 action token, because there is 1 peace token on the map. Well, we're now done with conflict in Wessex, and we can now proceed with turns, and the final player to pass to instigate conflict is going to be the one to take the next turn. That was us, so we now get to take a turn. Now, as of this moment, our allegiance is towards the Danes, and they are winning this conflict in West Anglia. I think this is an okay time for us to pass. We're not going to take the prepare for invasion token, though. We would like to do more things. We just have only 3 cards left in front of us. We do have a bunch of action tokens, but either way, I think let's pass and see what our opponents do. This means Siegfried and Eric can go, and they're in a similar boat, so they're going to pass, kind of assuming that Aylesworth is going to do something, because if they don't, well, the Danes will win over here, and everyone but Aylesworth will gain even more points. After thinking things through, Aylesworth is not going to pass. They have quite a few action tokens behind their screen, actually, and they've decided to use these to perform a market action. Now, as you can see, there are 7 of these market actions up here, and you have to spend the indicated number of action tokens in order to do that action. Most of these are primary actions, as you can see right here, but 2 of them are secondary passives. That means you could perform these and then still do another primary action, which could involve doing another one of these market plaque actions. Now, every time you perform an action, you do what it says. You then remove the token, move it to the right, and slide all of the rest of the tokens to the left. After considering their options, they've decided to spend 3 action tokens from behind their screen. and then they'll perform I shall take what is mine. Now, I do want to point out that every one of these tokens is double-sided. The backside is specific for a 2-player game, but of course, this is a 3-player game, so these are the actions they'll be doing. Now, I shall take what is mine says that they're going to choose one region and move 2 armies from it into an adjacent region, and then move 1 army from that adjacent region into another adjacent region that is not the first region where they started. With this in mind, they're going to start with Wessex. They're going to move these 2 West Saxons armies into East Anglia. That is adjacent, and it is important to note, you can move things into, out of, and remove things from regions that have peace, as you can see here. Now, after moving these 2 here, they have to move 1 out of here into an adjacent region that's not the starting region. So that's going to be Mercia, and it looks like they're trying to make the Saxons stronger here in East Anglia, so they're going to move a Danish army out into Mercia. Now, as you can see, the strength has changed quite a bit. There is 2 Danish strength in East Anglia, and there is 4 Saxon strength. After that, the activated market tile is going to be put to the right, and we'll slide the rest of those over to the left. Well, Aylesworth has finished their primary action, which finishes their turn, so that means we now get to go again. After thinking through our options, I think we want to play this card as our primary action, and this is the first hero card played of the game. That is Ragnar the Younger, and as you can see, we can place this figure into any region, and that figure counts as 1 Dane army for the purposes of scoring for us only. Now, the way this works is we can find Ragnar's figure. It's right over here. And then we're going to take an allegiance ring and flip it to the side that matches our allegiance. Of course, that's Danish. And we'll put the Ragnar figure inside of it. And then I think we'll place Ragnar into East Anglia. By default, heroes add 1 strength and count as an army for that region. However, Ragnar is a little different. If we look at the bottom, they have a permanent effect. It says Ragnar the Younger is 3 strength if your allegiance is Dane. Of course, it is. So that means Ragnar just added 3 Danish strength into East Anglia, which means there's 3, 4, 5 Danish strength total, so the Danes are now in the lead in this conflict. Now we can place this Ragnar the Younger card in front of us, and it will stay there for the rest of the game unless some effect is played that could slay Ragnar and remove them from the map. That is one of the cards, although it's somewhat likely to happen specifically to us. So we'll put this right over here, and that was a primary action, so our turn is done. That means it's time for Siegfried and Eric to go. After thinking through their options, they've decided to start their turn by performing Make the Right Choice, which is a secondary passive effect. That is going to cost them 4 actions, which is somewhat expensive, but as an effect, they can increase their affinity with one of the factions. This will then, of course, slide to the back, and because it's a secondary action, they do still have the ability to perform a primary action. Now, they've decided to increase their Mercian affinity, which will bring them from 1 to 2, and by doing that, they will now score 2 points for every scored Mercian army when the Saxons win conflict. Now, currently, Siegfried and Eric are allied with the Danes, although it looks like they want to change that now. As you can see, they have an asymmetric effect. It says whenever they gain Mercian affinity, they may switch allegiance to Saxon. They did indeed just gain Mercian affinity, and this says may, so it's not forced for them, but they do want to do this. So they're going to change sides, flipping this over, and just like that, they're now supporting the Saxons. When this happens, all allegiance rings controlled by that player are also flipped. And they can now continue with their turn because, of course, that was all a secondary action. Now, for their primary action, they've decided to move. Each one of the leader mats has a primary action for moving that leader on the board, and this varies from one to the other. We can see here for Siegfried and Eric, they can spend 2 action points to move either Siegfried or Eric by 1 region. It's worth noting this cost varies from one leader to the next. For some, it costs 3, and for others, it costs 1. Now, again, they can move either Siegfried or Eric, and if we look down here, they have a permanent effect that says whenever they move either Siegfried or Eric, they may also move the other one region for free as long as he moves to a different region. So for the cost of 2 action tokens, they can functionally move both of them as long as they don't both go to the same region. Now, they've decided to split up. They'll send one into East Anglia, and they'll send the other one up to Northumbria, which is where the succession token is, so the next conflict will happen there. Now, each leader token adds 1 strength, and of course, they are now aligned with the Saxons, so that's going to increase the Saxon strength by 1, so there is now a tie for strength in East Anglia. That allegiance change has definitely shaken things up out here, and of course, Siegfried and Eric are done with their turn. This means Aylesworth can go, and they've decided to play Leofric for their primary action. This is a hero, so they can find that figure over here, and then place an allegiance ring under it. which in this case is going to be on the Saxon side. Now they can summon Leofric into any region, and they're going to go to East Anglia, which is starting to become a very popular region of the board. And then we can take a look at this card. Now, Leofric counts as one West Saxon army for Aelswith's scoring only, and they also have a permanent effect. It says up to 2 West Saxon armies in Leofric's region each have +1 strength. Now, what this means is Leofric is going to add 1 strength for the Saxons, bringing it to 6, and then up to 2 West Saxon armies also get +1. So that is 2 more, and suddenly the Saxons have 8 strength in this region compared to the 5 of the Danes. Then, of course, Leofric will be placed face up near Aelswith. Well, it's now our turn, and we're the only ones allied with the Danes. And the Danes are losing pretty badly here in East Anglia, although that could change rather quickly. We have a tactical strike in our hand that would let us move 1 army into an adjacent region and then eliminate 2 armies in that region and then gain 1 of these affinities. That's quite good, and we could use that to move in here and remove these armies. If we got rid of both of these, well, that is 4 strength worth of Saxons because the hero Leofric is adding +1 strength for each of those. Currently, the Saxons are at 8, so that would drop them down to 4, and the Danes would once again be in the lead. But, of course, that would be one of our final 2 cards for this entire round. Now, we do have this other card, Change of Heart, that says that we must change allegiance when we play this, but then we do get to increase our Danish affinity once. So that is something to keep in mind. We could play this right now and change over to the Saxons, and then all 3 of us would be allied with the Saxons. Although, I'm not sure if that's the right call for us right now. I think instead, let's just let this happen, and let's pass, but more so, let's do a prepare for invasion pass. That means we take this token, so we will not take any more turns until the next conflict happens, and then of course we gain an action token equal to the number of peace tokens out here. There's only 1, but still, gaining an extra action token is certainly a nice thing. So we can put that in front of us, and now it's time for Siegfried and Eric to go. Now, as of this moment, there's a couple West Saxon armies over here in East Anglia, and Siegfried and Eric have 0 affinity with the West Saxons. It's looking like the Saxons are probably going to win this conflict, and Siegfried and Eric wants to make sure they can get as many points as they can, so they've decided to play a card that is Conflicted Loyalty. Now, depending on their current allegiance, they get to do an action. If they're allied with the Danes, they have to select 1 region and eliminate 3 Danes, whereas if they're allied with the Saxons, they have to select a region and put 2 Danes down. So definitely anti to what their allegiance wants, but then they can increase 1 affinity once, and that makes sense. Their loyalty is somewhat conflicted in this case, but they can definitely set things up because, of course, their allegiance is not necessarily going to stay as Saxon as the game goes on. Now, they're going to use this to increase their West Saxon affinity by 1, bringing them up to 1. And because they are allied with the Saxons, they have to place 2 Danes down into a region. And they've decided to go for Wessex. There's now 5 Danes down there, even though there is peace, so these won't really matter. Of course, they could be moved out through various actions as we continue the round, and it's worth noting, every single one of these regions is going to have conflict in the first round, then we're going to clear these off and play 1 more round, where every region will have another conflict. So each region will have at least 2 conflicts throughout the game, potentially more if there are ties, or through certain card effects. Well, Conflicted Loyalty can be placed right over here, and now it's time for Aelswith to go. And they've decided to spend 2 of their action points to move. That simply lets them move Aelswith into an adjacent region, which is going to be East Anglia. Now, currently, the Saxons are winning, and they're now winning even more. Aelswith's leader figure is going to increase the strength by 1, but this has definitely changed the situation, and not in a way that Siegfried and Eric are happy about. When we focus back on Aelswith's leader mat, it says, for a permanent effect, when the Saxons win a conflict in Aelswith's region, only West Saxon armies can score in that region, but all players score twice as many points for those West Saxon armies. Functionally, that means these 2 armies over here won't score because Aelswith is in this region. Now, that's finished their turn, and of course we don't have a turn because we did a prepare for invasion action. So it's come back to Siegfried and Eric. And they're not super happy with what happened there, but ultimately they don't think they want to spend more resources to change things. They're going to pass, so that means Aelswith can go again. After considering their options, they're going to play a card. This is a primary action, and it's called Summon. That says they can move any leader or hero from any region into Aelswith's region, and then they gain 1 West Saxon affinity, and they add 1 army into any region. This is a really powerful card right here. And they're going to use it to summon us. So we're going to head from Northumbria over here to East Anglia. Of course, we are contributing 2 strength because it's the first round of the game. So the Dane strength goes up to 7, but they are still losing. And then, very importantly, Aelswith gains 1 West Saxon affinity, which brings them from 3 to 4. That means they are now at the 3x multiplier instead of the 2x multiplier where they were just a second ago. And finally, they can add an army into any region, and they're going to add a West Saxon army into East Anglia. So this card has now been played, and East Anglia is now really popular. That's finished their turn. Then we don't take a turn because we did a prepare for invasion pass. And then Sigfrid and Eric, they've decided to pass. They're not going to do something else. And then Aelswith is going to pass after that. So that's a full consecutive pass from all of the players. And now it's time for conflict in East Anglia. We can see the Saxons are stronger, so we can put the peace token over here on the Saxon side, and then it's time to score. Now the Sigfrid and Eric player and Aelswith players are victorious because they're allied with the Saxons. So that means each one of them can score up to 5 armies, but because Aelswith is over here, that means only the blue West Saxon armies can be scored. For Sigfrid and Eric, that means realistically just these 3 armies right here. Now because of the Aelswith effect, those are worth twice as many points as normal for them. And their affinity is currently at 1. So normally this would be worth 3 points to them, but with it being doubled through Aelswith's ability, they actually get 6 points. So they can put those behind their screen, and then Aelswith will score, and they're going to get so many points. Now remember, they can score up to 5 armies, so they can do these 3. They have to be West Saxon because Aelswith is in this region, and remember that is part of her special permanent ability. Also remember that Leofric right here counts as a West Saxon army for scoring only, and again, only for the player who controls them. So technically, Aelswith can score all 4 of these West Saxon armies, and each one of those is worth 3 points to them, but then that is doubled because of Aelswith's ability. So technically, each one of these is worth 6 points to them, which means they just got 24 points. They, of course, had to expend quite a bit of their resources to pull this off, but that combo was huge. Sigfrid and Eric did get some points, but they're starting to feel like maybe they shouldn't have switched allegiances to help make that monstrous scoring happen. But remember, Aelswith didn't get any points in the first conflict scoring, while Sigfrid and Eric did get a decent amount. Either way, Aelswith is really happy they were able to pull that together, and now it's time for the losing allegiance players to get their benefits. Remember, that is going to be 2 action points for each of those players, and since we're the only ones allied with the losing side, we get an on-your-own bonus of getting 2 more action points, so we are back to being flush with these tokens. Now it's time to disband armies until we have 5 or less. We again start with the faction with the most armies. That's going to be West Saxon, so we remove this. We still have more than 5, though. And there's a tie for the most between Danes and West Saxons, so we'll remove these. And now we're at 5 or less, so we can stop disbanding. After that, the conflict token will head over here because that's where the succession token is. And currently, it looks like the Saxons have 1, 2, 3, 4 strength, and the Danes have just 2 strength. Now, we have the prepare for invasion token, so we get to decide where the succession token is going to be placed onto the board. And I think we'll go with Wales because that's as far as possible away from the opposing leaders. All right, conflict is done in East Anglia, so now we can move back to turns. The Aelswith player was the last one to pass, so that means they can now take their turn, and they've decided to pass. Remember, each time they do that, they gain an action token. After that, we can go, and I think let's move our leader token. That's going to cost us 2 of our action points, and as you can see, we have an extra effect that says after we can move 1 additional region. This means we're essentially twice as fast as our opponents. Now we are here, so I think let's move to Mercia and then head up to Northumbria. Once again, moving twice because we get that additional region move. And remember, Uhtred gives 2 strength in the first round and 3 strength during the second. It's the first round, so that's going to add 2 strength for the Danes. So it looks like strength is now tied at 4. All right, that was a primary action, so we're done. This means Sigfrid and Eric can now go. After considering their options, they're going to play Losses of War from their hand. That simply removes 1 army from 2 adjacent regions. They've decided to remove a Danish army from Northumbria and a Danish army from Mercia. Of course, that lowered the Danish strength by 1 in Northumbria, and that's the current conflict region. So the Danes are now just barely losing that conflict. That's finished their turn, so now Aelswith can go. And once again, they've decided to pass, which is going to get them 1 action point due to their asymmetric effect. This means we now get to go again. And we currently have 6 action points to spend. I think let's spend 3 of them doing a secondary action, and that is Destiny is All. This is passive, so we can do this before choosing a primary action or before passing. So we could spend the 3 action tokens, and this says we can draw 3 cards from the top of the round 2 deck, keep 1 of them, and put the other 2 to the bottom of that deck. So let's draw these cards and see which one is going to be the best for us. The first one right here is Battle Lust. That says we can add 2 Dane armies to a region adjacent to a region with at least 2 Dane armies, and then we remove 1 army from that region. It also says until the current conflict resolves, each time an opponent performs a primary action, we would gain a victory point. That's interesting. We play this right before we think our opponents might want to do a lot of things to change the situation around. This is a strategic alliance. It says we could add 2 Mercian armies to a region adjacent to a region with at least 2 Northumbrian armies. We then remove 1 army from that region and gain an action token. And the other option is friendships. Now, this is a secondary instant action. If we chose this, we would activate it immediately. This would get us 2 action tokens, and we would increase our West Saxon affinity twice. Currently, our West Saxon affinity is right here. Doing that would bring us all the way up here, just 1 spot away from the 3x multiplier. Now, at the moment, we're allied with the Danes, but that might not always be the case, and having all that West Saxon affinity could be worth a bunch of points later on, especially when you consider the fact that Aelswith is particularly incentivized to be in regions with a lot of these to double that scoring and stop the scoring for everything else. Out of these 3 options, these are the ones I'm looking at the most. I do like the idea of investing in the future with this affinity, but Battle Lust I think is too good for us in this moment. So I think that's the one we're going to choose. That's going to go into our hand. The other 2 will then go to the bottom of this deck. And now we have the option of doing a primary action. Remember, instead we could pass. And I think we're just going to play Battle Lust. This effect down at the bottom means if we want to go now-ish, we should probably do it soon to get as many extra points as possible from our opponents potentially doing primary actions. Of course, if they avoid primary actions in order to not give us points, well then in that case they're potentially giving us points by letting us win a conflict region. Yeah, so we're going to place this one. Again, we choose 1 region that has at least 2 Dane armies in it. We can go with Mercia, and then in an adjacent region, we can add 2 Dane armies and remove 1 army. So we're going to go for Northumbria, putting 2 Dane armies up here, and then we can remove 1 army. I figure we'll remove a Northumbrian army. And of course, now we have to change the strength. We have 2, and then that's going to be 3, 4, 5 for the Danes, and then the Saxons currently only have 3. Then we put this face up in front of us, and again, until the next conflict is resolved, we get a victory point every time one of our opponents performs a primary action. Well, speaking of our opponents, our turn is done, so now Siegfried and Eric can go. After considering their options, they're going to play Strong Ambush. This is a primary action, and it says they can move either Siegfried or Eric into an adjacent region, and then they can remove up to 3 armies from that region. Then they gain 1 Dane affinity, and they may change their allegiance back to Dane. So they'll start by moving into an adjacent region. Then it looks like they're going to remove all 3 of these Mercian armies. After that, their Dane affinity goes up once, and they are going to change their allegiance back. They were not going for the Saxons for all that long. Now they can flip that over. And overall, they might be kind of regretting that initial flip. They saw just how many points Aelswith was able to get, and they figure they probably don't want to enable them getting even more points. They want to try and catch up with them by switching allegiances and pushing for the Danes. Now, this was a primary action, which means our Battle Lust will activate, getting us 1 point. Well, they are done, which means Aelswith can go. And they've decided they don't want to give us a primary action. They are going to pass, which of course gives them an action token because of their asymmetric effect. And they've also decided they're going to prepare for invasion. So they're going to take this, which means they won't take any more turns to potentially continue passing, but they still think this is fine. And of course, they get 2 action tokens because there are 2 peace tokens out here on the board. All right, that's finished their turn, which means we can go. And honestly, I think I'm currently okay with the situation out here. Let's go ahead and pass. This means Siegfried and Eric can go, and they're going to pass as well. So that means it's time for conflict. And we can see in Northumbria, the Danes are going to win. Now we can score. It looks like there are 3 Dane armies. Remember, you can score up to 5 of them. So we're going to score all 3 of these, and we will get 2 points each. So that is 6 points for us. And it appears Siegfried and Eric will also get those points. I was really hoping we could have Ragnar over there because they count as an army that only we could score to get more points, but unfortunately they were not in the right position for this. So it looks like both of us get 6 points. I'm sure the Siegfried and Eric player was really hoping they could get 1 more Danish affinity before this happened, but they weren't able to swing it. So we'll each gain our 6 points. And then, of course, Aelswith is allied with the losing side, so they'll gain 2 action points, and they did it alone. They're the only ones defending and losing, so they'll gain 2 more of these. Remember, if you are on the winning side and you do that alone, you get 5 extra victory points. Now, it would be time to disband armies, but there's only 5 over there, so we don't have to disband any. And then the conflict token will move to the succession token zone. And then it looks like Aelswith has the prepare for invasion token, so they get to decide where the succession token goes. At least earlier in the round, it would be a decision. As of right now, the only spot it could go is Mercia, because every other spot either has a peace token in it or a conflict token. Remember, if we do conflict in a region and the strength is tied, then we don't put one of these tokens down and we move on. So we would need to come back into that region that tied earlier to then have conflict, and we keep doing that until either we have peace in all the regions or we have a tie in that last region. Well, it looks like the conflict token is in Wales, and currently the strength is 2 for the Danes and 3 for the Saxons. Well, we can keep taking turns, and Sigfrid and Eric were the last ones to pass, so they now get to go. And they've decided to play Battle for Fernham. If we look in, that is a primary action, and that says they can add 1 Dane army into a region that is adjacent to a region with at least 1 Dane army. Then, if the faction that they are currently aligned with has the higher strength in Wessex, they gain 4 victory points. They are currently aligned with the Danes, and the Danes are doing very well in Wessex. They have 5 strength to 0 of the Saxons, so this will happen. So, once again, the Sigfrid and Eric player can put 1 Dane army down into a region adjacent to one with a Dane army. They're going to go with Wales, which isn't too surprising. That means the strength is tied there, and Wessex is certainly going towards the Danes, so Sigfrid and Eric will gain 4 more points. All right, that's finished their turn, which means it's now time for Aelswith to go. Although before we do that, I just realized I forgot to cycle these when we performed Destiny is All a couple of turns ago. So technically, these should all be over there. Sorry about that. All right, Aelswith can do their turn now, and they've decided to spend 3 action tokens to perform England is Born. This is a primary action, and it lets them put a Mercian army into one region, a West Saxon army into a different region, and a Northumbrian army into yet another different region. Because this says ABC, that means these must all be different. So they're putting down 1 of each of these, and they'll put the West Saxon into East Anglia, which does currently have peace. Then they'll put the Northumbrians over here in Wales, and the Mercians will go back to Mercia, which thematically makes sense. That's going to finish their turn, and of course, these all have to slide over. All right, that means it's time for us to go. Now, before we actually take our turn, I just realized the allegiance rings for Sigfrid and Eric should have been swapped around as soon as their allegiance changed. All right, now we can take our turn, and we have some very powerful cards in our hand. These are actually the 2 that we always have with Uhtred, and this change of heart says we must change allegiance, but then we can increase our Dane affinity once. That would bring us here, which is nice, although we would change our allegiance to Saxons, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we would be kind of doing things along with Aelswith, who currently, I think, has the most victory points after an incredible scoring over here in East Anglia. So I'm not sure if helping them score even more points is in our best interest. Now, that being said, we could do that and still probably net some points on them because of Tactical Strike. This lets us move an army into an adjacent region and then eliminate 2 armies there. And it is worth noting that Ragnar here does count as an army. So this is how we could move our hero. And this would also let us increase our West Saxon, Mercian, or Northumbrian affinity. If we increased our Northumbrian affinity here, we would be getting 2 points for each army we score there, as opposed to 1, which is the amount that Aelswith would probably score, so we'd be making up a difference. Also, this plan involves eliminating armies, which allows us to get points due to our permanent effect down over here. You know what? I think I like this plan. Let's play Change of Heart now. That's going to flip our allegiance over, which means we have to flip our allegiance ring here. Then we increase our Dane affinity, which isn't good now, but I imagine we will flip our allegiance again at some point, especially if we're able to get this up into the 3x multiplying area, which we're just 1 away from. And that's all we do for this action, but we can play this one on our next turn potentially in order to really help swing things. All right, well, that's finished our turn, so now Sigfrid and Eric can go. They currently have one card in their hand, and considering they are now alone over here with the Danes, they've decided to pass, and they're going to prepare for an invasion immediately. So that means they won't do any more actions. So they're essentially saying that they're not going to be fighting over here. And speaking of Wales, I just realized the Saxon strength should have been increased up to 4 when that extra Northumbrian army was placed there. Now Sigfrid and Eric are going to gain 3 action tokens because there's 3 peace tokens on the board. They can put those behind their screen, and they are done until the next conflict. So now Aelswith can go. Yikes, and it looks like they could see what we're doing, and they have more action tokens behind their shield than we realized. They're going to spend 5 of these tokens right now to make the right choice. This is a passive secondary action, so they haven't even performed a primary action yet. And of course, this will let them increase their affinity on one of the tracks. And they can see where this is going. They're going to increase their Northumbrian affinity. After that, they can do a primary action, but they've decided to pass, which means they once again get another one of these actions. They're really making up for the deficit of actions they started with that passing effect. That means it's time for us to go again. And in order to make this whole plan of mine worth it, we really do need to increase our affinity, which means we really need to play this card. And I'm now kind of regretting it. It seems like maybe we're kind of playing into Aelswith's plan. They're doing really well so far, but I think we need to keep going. So we're going to play this one. That lets us move 1 army into an adjacent area, then defeat 2 armies there, and then increase 1 of our non-Danish affinities. With this, let's move Ragnar here, and we will eliminate both of these Danish armies. Remember, we don't have a Dane alliance anymore. Because these don't match our alliance, our Brutal Tactics permanent effect will get us 1 victory point. So we can put that into our pile. And then, of course, we can increase 1 non-Danish affinity, and we'll increase Northumbrian, so we're matching Aelswith. That's finished our turn. Of course, we skip Sigfrid and Eric because they did a prepare for invasion turn. And now Aelswith is going to pass again, getting them another action token. And now when it comes to us, I think we need to pass. So we stop giving Aelswith so many of those action tokens. So we have all passed around, which means conflict in Wales will happen. It looks like the Saxons are winning this, so we can put the peace sign with the Saxon side up. Then when we score this, oh, yikes. There is a West Saxon army in here, and I didn't even really consider that. So when we score this, we can choose up to 5 of the Saxon armies. We'll go with these. So for us, we will get 2 points for each Northumbrian and 1 point for each West Saxon. So we get 2, 4, 6, 7 points. But then Aelswith is going to get 2 points for each of those Northumbrian armies and 3 points for this West Saxon army. So they're going to get 2, 4, 6, 9 points total. So they still got more than we did. It is worth noting that Aelswith's ability that just causes the West Saxon armies to be scored at 2x only happens when Aelswith is in that region, and it goes for the Saxons, and of course, they're not currently in that region. Well, it's time to disband armies. There's obviously more than 5, so we can remove these, and now we are at 5. And then, of course, Sigfrid and Eric are allied with the loser of this conflict, so they'll gain 2 actions, and they're the only ones allied with the loser, so they went alone in it, getting them 2 more action tokens. After that, the conflict token will go here, and the succession token is going to be placed off to the side of the board because there are no legal places to put it, because currently the rest of the spots have peace tokens on them. Now the prepare for invasion token can be placed over here, and we were the last ones to pass, so we can now take an action for the final conflict of this round. It looks like currently there's 1 army there. Well, I guess Ragnar counts as an army as well. We do need to calculate the strength over here. And of course, since Ragnar is our hero, their allegiance base should have been flipped when we changed our allegiance. So let's now figure out the strength. Now, Ragnar only gives 1 strength when they are allied with the Saxons. Remember, they give 3 when allied with the Danes. So that's just 1, 2 strength for the Saxons, and then 1 strength for the Danes with Sigfrid over here. So this will go over there. Well, it's time for us to take an action, and we have no cards in our hand. We do have these 3 action tokens here, though, and it's worth noting we save these from the first round into the next round, so we don't have to spend them if we don't want to. With 3 action tokens, we could do either of these things. We could change our allegiance once again back to the Danes, or we could eliminate 1 army in 2 adjacent regions and then get 2 points. Although I think in this moment, let's just pass and see what our opponents do, because we don't have that many resources left. This means Sigfrid and Eric can go, and they're going to start this turn using this permanent effect for the first time. That says once per turn before performing a market action, they may move the cheapest plaque to the most expensive slot and shift all the plaques down to replace it. The cheapest one is No Mercy, so that's going to go to the back. And by doing that, I Am Dane went from 4 to 3 actions, and they're happy about that because this is the action they want to perform. They're going to spend 3 action tokens, and that simply lets them add 2 Dane armies into one region. Then, of course, this will be slid to the back. They don't have to consider their options too much here. They definitely want to add the Danes here into Mercia, which will increase the Dane strength by 2, which puts them into the lead just barely. After that, Aelswith can go, and they've decided to play Forced March. This is a primary action, and it says they have to add 1 Dane army to a region adjacent to a region with at least 1 Dane army. Then they may move up to 1 West Saxon, 1 Mercian, and 1 Northumbrian army from that region into one adjacent region. With this in mind, they're going to start with Wessex, which has at least 1 Dane army, so they're going to add 1 into an adjacent region, and that will be East Anglia, and then from here, they can send up to 1 of the West Saxon, Mercian, and Northumbrian into an adjacent region. They'll send all of them over here into Mercia. So that has increased the Saxon strength by 3 in Mercia, which brings them up to 5. Well, that's finished their turn, so now we can go. And considering the Saxons are now winning here, I don't think we want to change our allegiance. And while we still have 3 actions, I don't think we want to use them right now. Let's just hold on to them and see if we want to spend them in this round or maybe just save them for the next round. With us passing, that means Siegfried and Eric can now go. And they've decided to spend 4 of their action tokens to perform I Shall Take What Is Mine. Once again, that lets them move 2 armies into an adjacent region and then 1 army from that region into another one. They've decided to start in Wessex, and they'll move 2 Danish armies into Mercia, and then they're going to move this West Saxon army up into Northumbria. This means the Saxon strength went down by 1, and the Danish strength went up by 2. All right, that's finished their turn, which means Aelswith can now go, and they've decided to play Quick March. This says they will gain 1 action token, and they can move 1 army into an adjacent region, and then an army from that region into another. They've decided to send this West Saxon army into Mercia and this Danish army down into Wessex, which means the Danish strength went down by 1 and the Saxon strength went up by 1. So the Saxons are once again in the lead. They are done, which means we get to go again, and I think we're going to continue to pass and just hold on to our action tokens. So that means Siegfried and Eric can go. And it looks like they've been waiting for this moment to do a crushing blow. This is a primary action, and it says they can move a Dane army into an adjacent region and then eliminate up to 1 West Saxon, Northumbrian, and Mercian army in that region. They're going to move this one up from Wessex and then eliminate all 3 of these armies, which really is a crushing blow. Just like that, the Danes are at 5 strength, and the Saxons are all the way down to 2. Well, they've finished their turn, which means Aelswith can go, and they did not see that crushing blow coming. They have decided they're going to pass, which will give them an action token due to their asymmetric effect. And now it's time for us to go, and I think we've been waiting long enough. Let's spend our 3 action tokens in order to activate To See is to Be Wise, which lets us change our allegiance once again. So we flip this back over, and then of course we flip the allegiance rings underneath our heroes, as well as our leaders. By doing that, Ragnar is now going to add strength to the Danes, and remember, they add 3 strength when aligned with the Danes. So that is going to increase the Danish strength all the way up to 8. All right, that's finished our turn. Now Siegfried and Eric can go, and they're going to pass. And now Aelswith can go, and they've decided to pass, which gets them an action token, and they are going to do a Prepare for Invasion pass. So they're going to take this token, and then they're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 more action tokens because there's 4 peace tokens on the map. So they can add these behind their screen, and they have a ton of actions ready for them in the next round of the game. Now, I mentioned the next round because at this point, we've all passed consecutively, so now we can move it into performing the conflict in Mercia, and after that, this round will be coming to a close. But I shouldn't get ahead of myself. Let's now perform this conflict. As you can see, the Danes easily won this one, and that means Siegfried and Eric are going to get 2 points each for each Dane army, and they can score 4 of them, so they're going to get 8 points. They are really wishing they could have found a way to get their affinity up 1 more to get more of those points. Still, 8 points is pretty good for them, and then when we score, we actually get to score all 5 of these, because remember, Ragnar counts as 1 Dane army for scoring only for us. So that means we actually get 10 points. After that, Aelswith is going to get 2 action points because they are aligned with the losing side, and then 2 more because, once again, they went alone. You're going to have a lot more of these going alone bonuses in a 3-player game versus something like a 5-player game. Aelswith has a tremendous number of action points behind their screen at this point, getting them ready for the next round. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, though. We can now continue this conflict. We don't have to disband because there aren't more than 5 armies. Of course, we should also add a peace token down with the Danish side face up. And now it's time to move the conflict token, and when you do this after all 5 regions have scored, you give it to the player who has the prepare for invasion token, and then that will be put back onto the board. So the player who takes this in the last conflict of the first round will be the one to place the conflict token at the start of the second round of the game. Well, that conflict is done, and at this point, every region has a peace token. This means the conflict phase of the first round has come to a close, and we can now move into the cleanup phase. Now, the first thing we do in this phase is every player is going to gain action points up to their starting amount printed on their player boards. We have 5 showing, so we gain up to 5. Currently, we have none, so we're going to gain these 5. So because of this, it does actually kind of make sense to spend these instead of saving them into the next round, unless you already have more than your starting amount on your card. Siegfried and Eric also have a starting amount of 5, and they tell us they don't have any, so they'll get 5, bringing them up to that amount. Meanwhile, Aelswith has a starting amount of 1, and they have way more than 1 behind their screen, so they're not going to gain any in this moment. After this, all players have to discard all the cards that are face up in front of them that do not have permanent effects and that are not associated with their specific leader. So for example, Siegfried and Eric is going to discard all 3 of these, but they'll keep these as well as that one because it shows that permanent effect. Likewise, for us, we will discard all of these and keep those. And up here, Aelswith will discard those while keeping this one. These all go into the associated discard pile. Next up, if any players had round cards still in their hand, they would be forced to discard all of those, and they'd gain 1 action token for each one they discarded. So if you get cards that you just can't really make work, at least you can get action tokens for the next round for those. Now in this case, Aelswith didn't play one of their leader cards, and you don't get action tokens for that. This card was called Banish, and it would have let them move a leader or hero from their region into any region, then gain a non-Danish affinity, and then they would have the option of changing their allegiance. Realistically, they probably should have played this card, but they didn't, so that'll just stay in front of them. Now all players gather both of their leader cards and put them into their hand. We then remove all peace tokens from the board, and then we make sure the conflict token goes to the player who took the prepare for invasion token in the final conflict of the last round. And then the succession token is going to be given to the player to the left of the player with the conflict token, so that is going to be us. And that's finished the cleanup phase. This means at this point the game can move into the second round, which again has a draft phase, then a conflict phase, and then instead of cleanup, it has final scoring. I do want to mention that at the start of that second conflict phase, that is when Aelswith would need to place this conflict token down into a region, and then we would place the succession token down into a different region. Now, at this point in the tutorial, I'm going to stop playing through it. I have shown you half of the game so far, and now we can talk about final scoring, which is pretty simple. Now, this again happens after the second conflict phase is completely evaluated, and in final scoring, we just reveal our player screens, and whoever has the most victory points will be the winner. Now, I do want to mention what happens if there is a tie with those victory points. In this case, we look at the allegiances of the tied players, and then we count the number of these peace tokens out here on the board with the matching side face up, which means they won that conflict. And the tied player who has allegiance to the side that won the most conflicts in the second round will break the tie in their favor. Now, if the tied players have the same allegiance, then at that point, each player is going to sum up the positions of all 4 of their affinity tokens on the tracks, and the player with the most overall affinity is going to break the tie in their favor. If there is still a tie in that moment, then the player with the highest initiative number printed on their leader mat will break the tie in their favor. Well, at this point, I've taught just about all of the rules to the game, so that's going to bring this tutorial to a close. I hope you enjoyed learning how to play The Last Kingdom. As always, I'd like to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel, including these producer-level Patreon supporters. If you too would like to directly support the channel and the creation of future videos like this one, then please go to jongetsgames.com/support. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button for it down below, as well as the subscribe button for the channel. Thanks for watching.